has been great as usual. It's been extremely informative. I've learned a lot. But before we end this discussion, I'd like to get closing thoughts from each of our panelists. Dr. Arteaga, closing thoughts?
Well, we live at a most exciting time in breast cancer. I think that, and I'm torn between two stories, but the one I would put at the top is the CDK4 inhibitor story. To me, that's a transformative therapy that's putting tumors through a block that we can call Darwinian. And I think this creates an opportunity and a responsibility for us to write the book of what that breast cancer looks like, because that's going to dictate our approach to those patients. And I would anticipate, based on the data we've seen, that the adjuvant trials with these drugs are going to be amazing.
Great. Dr. Baselga?
Well, I think it's very exciting what we have discussed today. I mean, all these new options. I'm a little bit overwhelmed on the complexity of all this and how are we going to be making clinical decisions, and our practicing physicians and ourselves, how are we going to cope with all this data and all this. So I think, therefore, I would say that I'm excited but overwhelmed by the complexity of all this.
Dr. Blackwell?
Well, if Jose is overwhelmed, I'm going to have a downright panic attack right here.
He was being modest.
I thought I had an answer, but my answer would be I'm pretty excited about Olympiad. You know, we've had olaparib, we've heard about single agent activity for a long time. I think the study was done in the right way. It wasn't necessarily adding a bunch of stuff. It was head to head with 3 different commonly used chemotherapy, and we saw a benefit in the BRCA mutation carriers. And to me, this is an example of precision medicine or personalized medicine at its finest. You have a mutation, we have a drug that has activity in your tumor, and it's better than chemotherapy. So for me, that plenary presentation at this week's ASCO is going to be very exciting.
Great. Debu?
Well, I'm very excited that we're making progress on many fronts with different subtypes of tumors. And I think the lesson learned is that some of the approaches that we thought were not going to be paying off, like monoclonal antibodies or immunoconjugates, which have actually been around for quite some time, are finally starting to pay off as we start to design well-done studies with correlative studies. So I guess the message I would like to give everybody out there is that participation in clinical trials, contributing tissue for those of you that open clinical trials are all very, very important. It should be a part of the standard of care to do everything you can to either open or refer patients to clinical trials. This is the only way we're going to move the bar.
Denise?
I think the future and horizon has just gotten brighter and brighter with all the presentations. I can think back to ASCO years ago, and at this point, I think it's challenging to try to really make sure that you take away all the different messages and nuances of treatment that the clinical trials, while overall there may be positive findings or maybe not, but then we've got ways of identifying subgroups of patients within that we're having to learn to extrapolate these treatment options for those patients. And so I think the menu is getting broader and broader. There continues to be paradigm shifts. The Olympiad, I think, may put the PARP first and chemo second. We're seeing these novel targeted agents and seeing patients get just targeted therapy without chemotherapy. So I think the challenge is trying to keep up with all the changes in the landscape of oncology.
Oh, I agree. But again, thank you all for your contributions to this discussion. On behalf of our panel, we'd like to thank you for joining us, and we hope you found this peer exchange discussion to be useful and informative. Again, thank you all for listening to us.